This video is brought to you by my new book, Mouth of Winter, a direct follow-up to my previous novel, Dullbloods. If you're looking for something new to read or want to see what happens to John Kettle next, then feel free to check it out. Links are in the description. Yeah, autism is a hell of a drug. Alright, welcome to Off the Cuff, the vlogging essay series where I ramble about something that's stuck in my head for your enjoyment. Lately, I've had a particular blue video game character running around my head, and he's been giving me some interesting ideas that I just had to get out into the interwebs for you to nitpick. See, growing up, I was more of a Mario fanboy than a Sonic fan. This had more to do with regular exposure to Mario's games over Sonic's. That isn't to say I wasn't into the blue blur, but my enjoyment of Sonic came from different sources than most other people's. While everyone else enjoyed the Genesis classics, my introduction to Sonic as a kid was primarily through renting VHS tapes of a certain Deke cartoon. And later playing the Game Gear game at my cousin's house whenever my family went to Melbourne. I also rented the OVA more than a few times, unaware it was an anime, and I knew nothing at all about the SatAM cartoon. It wasn't until I rented Sonic Adventure 2 for my GameCube that I finally became more plugged into Sonic on the gaming front, and the series' fluctuating and crash of quality when I finally learned how to use the internet back around 2008 or 2009. So while I can't say I'm a long-time fan, I have been aware of Sonic's ups and downs, and as such, it's great to see the Sonic franchise not only getting back on track, but surpassing the hype of its heyday, with a movie series that's been pumping out consistently good movies, and an equally good mini-series with a planned second season, a spin-off series that, while failed on the gaming front, managed to produce Seinfeld for kids.
If you want to know what women want, talk to a woman. That's brilliant! Where can I find one? I'm a woman! I'm refined and elegant like a delicate flower, you jerk!
And Frontiers moving Sonic in a fantastic new direction. I reviewed Frontiers when it came out in 2022. It was a fantastic experience that was only held back by some rough jank and a lack of polish from it being Sonic's first open world outing, hence why I gave it a 7 out of 10. But with the blue rodent running around inside my head recently, I've naturally been thinking about the eventual sequel, whether it be a Frontiers 2 or something else, and that's led to me thinking up a wish list of what I would personally love to see in terms of story and gameplay. Now, I want to make this clear. I am not making any predictions, these are just my thoughts on what I would like to see featured when we do eventually get it. But before I get into it, a brief aside that does tie into what I want to see for Frontiers 2. This year, I finally got around to trying out Sonic Forces, and I have to admit, I like it, but I understand why the reception for it was so mixed, and why people do like to hate on it. For one, the levels are all linear with little to no alternate paths or set pieces, so after you first go, you've pretty much seen everything that level has to offer. Meanwhile, the enemies are just pussies that just stand there and let you make them your bitch, making the game piss easy. The story takes itself so seriously, while bathed in Saturday morning cartoon visuals, with nothing gritty to balance it out for ages, so it's impossible to take seriously. I mean, for real, they couldn't have given at least one character an actual freaking gun, instead of just the wisping things? Then there's the custom avatar. That was a phenomenal idea that was undercooked. The perks and gameplay tweaks your customization options make are so minor that you don't even notice them. Classic Sonic, while a nice addition, had no reason to be in the game. Then there's the promise of the classic villains getting together for round 2, only for 2/3 of them to do nothing and just turn out to be illusions. So yeah, a flawed game that had great ideas. One of them was the villain, Infinite, who was constrained by the lackluster story. But if Shadow can get a great story that's bundled with the remaster of Generations, and some rival dialogue from the recent Crossworlds racing game can start a movement to get Silver his own game,
it's no use!
There's no reason Infinite can't be used as an effective villain. So first on my wish list, bring back Infinite as the main antagonist. This is how I see the story going down. After escaping from the Phantom Ruby, Infinite learnt about cyberspace and the Ancients' ruins. He journeyed to a new set of ruins Eggman had been keeping an eye on, and uses cyberspace to overclock the Ruby, but also enhance his powers beyond what they were before. So now not only can he warp space and produce potent illusions, but flesh and blood creatures that he can also unmake on a whim. From there, the inciting incident would be Infinite abducting Eggman to lure Sonic and Sage to him, his plan being to kill them to prove his superiority, and then merge cyberspace with the material world to reshape it into his paradise or ideal world. This setup would not only be awesome, but also allow the next item on my list to be possible. Bring back the Werehog. Recently I tried out Sonic Unleashed Recompiled, and realised two things. First, Sega should have remastered this game years ago, and the other is that the Werehog deserves another go, because there is something truly great here that a few tweaks and some extra polish could really shine. But now I'm getting ahead of myself. How the Werehog could be brought back, not as a transformation for Sonic, but as his own character, is through Infinite. Eventually it's revealed that with his new power, Infinite simulated alternate timelines to create fallen versions of characters to recruit, and act as enforcers to maintain control of the Ancient's ruins. These characters are oblivious to the truth, that Infinite created them, and that their lives and suffering were just lies. In the case of the Werehog, he comes from a timeline where Sonic never met Chip, Dark Gaia was never stopped, the world was destroyed, and he was permanently transformed. At his lowest, Infinite appeared and offered him a chance to have a hand in making a newer, better world. The Werehog and the other two enforcers would act as overseers for a new trio of titans, and act as the true final bosses for each area. As for the other two enforcers, the second would be a frustrated and wrathful version of Blaze that was resented by her subjects, and the third... yeah, I haven't been able to think of a third, so screw it, let's just throw a version of Jet the Hawk in there. Next, I'd like to see more variation in the setting. The Starfall Islands were nice and all, but in the follow-up, I'd like to see more than just grassy fields, desert desolation, and wet grassy fields. Give us some snowy peaks, verdant jungles, bushlands, or even a mushroom forest. If the next game takes place on a new set of islands, they could add this variation through biomes, marshland, and rusted industrial scapes alongside the fields or desert from the first game to feel fresh for longer. I'd also like to see a more fantastical art direction, just to further set this game apart. This doesn't mean abandoning the sci-fi aesthetics from Frontiers, but throw in some regional variants of enemies and the Ancient's ruins to make the setting feel more lived in, that people once lived amongst these ruins and added to the setting's history, like a palace that had been built over an Ancient's compound, or the ruins of a town or a city that's been abandoned for centuries. These could also be used to add some platforming challenges that utilize these structures, like rail grinding on decorative buttresses or parkour rooftop hopping. Now give me more of that sweet Frontiers combat system. I remember being amazed at how much fun Frontiers combat system was, but looking back, I wish it was deeper. I'd keep the combat identical at the core. Sonic does not need to become Devil May Cry, but I'd give it a bigger, larger skill tree. One where the player can't unlock every new attacker skill in one playthrough. This would give the player a reason to respec and experiment with different upgrade selections, and give the player a reason to get excited for a New Game Plus playthrough, where the game could then get close to Devil May Cry territory. Then there's the Titans. I love these guys, but one thing annoyed me back when I played Frontiers. They did jack shit till it was time for the boss fight. You'd see them in the distance patrolling, but they never did anything. They just wander in circles, or fly in Wyvern's case, and what created a sense of awe at first, but once you knew they were contained, they lost a lot of that luster. So let's set them free. It would make for a great sense of danger if a new crop of Titans could wander the open world, modify the enemies and platforming hazards around them as they move, and be a real source of peril that Sonic can't take down until he can go super for the boss fight. Of course, I'm not stupid. I know the most likely reason the Titans were constrained was because it would have been a nightmare to let them wander, but they're messing up the open world by adding too many variables to keep everything cohesive. So for the Frontiers sequel, let's just widen their wandering space and design it with their presence in mind. That way the Titans can still feel like a wandering threat where every time we have to go near them, the player will be on edge, while still keeping them inside the area that makes up their boss arena. Just like in Shadow of the Colossus. Now the last thing on my wish list is the DLC I'd like to see for a Frontiers follow-up. Give me 2 meaty story expansions, one for Infinite, the other for the Werehog. Make the first 3 to 5 hours in length, and the other 8 to 10 at best, and give the player real bang for the extra buck. The Infinite one would act as the game's episode Shadow. We would play as Infinite, just after he's arrived at the ruins, and we'd see how he took control of cyberspace. He'd have his own moveset based on his abilities from Forces, and as a rough template, combined with how Silver played in Sonic 06.
It's no use!
This would give Infinite some unique puzzle gameplay that could take cues from Tears of the Kingdom, as well as a unique sense of progression, as he would start out weak with limited power, but as the player takes control of more of cyberspace, he can do more for longer, until he eventually becomes an absolute force of nature. This DLC would act as an effective prologue, showing how he got the idea to create the false timelines, ending with a Titan boss fight against a Guardian construct, and with Infinite overseeing everything he now has control over, and then proceeds to create the false timelines to create his enforcers.
There's already more the madness here!
Meanwhile, the Werehog DLC would act as an epilogue. Infinite has been defeated, he's now trapped in cyberspace, Sonic, his friends, and Eggman have all gone home, and the Werehog has survived the events of the main game. Now he's camping out amongst the ruins, unsure what to do, grappling with an existential crisis of identity, that everything he knew was a lie, and now resides in a world where he never belonged. The Sonic series is no stranger to touching mature themes, so this would be a great opportunity to explore existentialism. Since the Werehog is meant to be a slower mountain of muscle than a nimble speedster, that means his platforming would have to be built from the ground up to be different. Granted, his run speed would be faster than it is in Unleashed, but to really get around, he'd make use of his most unique trait, his stretchy arms. So we'd have platforming inspired by Spider-Man 2 and Prince of Persia, swinging around like Tarzan on a vine and throwing himself into the sky. This would be so much fun and would make some great challenges for the player to engage with. Granted, this would also mean there wouldn't be any cyberspace levels for the Werehog, due to his core gameplay being so different, but it would be an understandable concession. As for the story content, it would follow the Werehog realizing another enforcer survived. Let's go with the Wrathful Blaze. While the Werehog is struggling with his identity, she isn't. She's eagerly holding on to her identity as the rejected, vindictive queen, and doesn't care for the truth. So now she's planning to forge her own kingdom in the real world, by seizing cyberspace to build her army. So it's up to the Werehog to stop her. This would end with the Werehog defeating her and taking the first steps towards forging his own identity, and moving on from the life he thought he'd lived. An extra detail for this DLC could also be a side quest tying into its ending, where the Werehog thinks he's being watched, and if the player chooses to chase down this potential stalker, they get a multi-stage boss fight that ends with the boss disengaging. The ending itself would be the Werehog returning to his camp, where he meets the stalker, and if you did the quest line, they're revealed to have been Team Dark, Shadow, Rouge, and Omega, sent there by a reformed gun to look into the ruins and were keeping an eye on him. After spotting him, they were tasked with assessing him. After seeing what he's done and confirming he's not a threat, they offer him a job as a gun agent. The DLC would then conclude with the Werehog grinning before he says yes or no. And a last minute addition here. I'd like to see the Rookie, the custom character from Forces, come back. If not in the follow-up to Frontiers, then in another game. There was a lot of potential with that character and the customization that came with him, that like the rest of Forces just was not realised, so the Frontiers follow-up would be a good place to let the Rookie run wild and experiment. If Frontiers 2 is where this happens, he doesn't need to even have a story. He could just be part of a DLC sandbox mode where the player is just free to muck around and break stuff. Hell, they could even add Barry for shits and grins. Anyway, that's everything I'd like to see in the follow-up to Sonic Frontiers. What do you think of my wish list? Let me know in the comments, and I do have some other Sonic-related stuff rattling around in my head, so I might do another one of these videos on those. Like my idea for a Silver game or a third season of Sonic Boom. All depends on how well this one does. Anyway, see ya.